Today we're going to start the last major area in marketing in this course, and that deals with the place element of the marketing mix, distribution. We're going to start in this segment by looking at what marketing channels are and what they do. We'll follow that up in the next segment looking at the different design elements we need to take into consideration and how we design a channel. And our last two segments will deal with the actual logistics and movement of product and with retailing. So let's go ahead and begin with talking about marketing channels and their functions. Okay, to begin with, a common term that you hear in today's business world is supply chain. And I do not want you to think that these two terms are opposite or they mean different things. They mean almost the same thing. And let me give you a visual representation of what each of them is referring to. What I am showing here is a channel. We start with our supplier, get raw materials, we get components, and those suppliers will give it to us, who are the producer, or not give, we have to buy it from them, of course. We in turn then make the product. We'll sell it to, say, a wholesaler, who in turn sells it to a retailer, who sells it to the consumer. Now, when you're studying production and operations management, you focus on the supplier end of it, which are these first two pale yellow ones. Marketing, when we look at our channels of distribution, we tend to focus on from the producer on downward. Okay. Well, the term supply chain management is referring to the whole thing. So we're looking and emphasizing a part of the supply chain, what we call the distribution or marketing channel. Okay, so let's go now and look at what the channel can actually do, what some of the functions are that the channel performs. First off, a channel is going to provide utility. Now, I'm asking you to go way back in your memory here, way back to what we've talked about at the very beginning of this course. And we talked about how utility is the way we satisfy customers, different methods of satisfying the target market. With distribution, we are automatically going to provide two types of utility, the place and the time. We're doing that because our whole job with distribution is getting it where the customer wants it and when the customer wants it. That's our basic definition. Now, in addition to that, we may also provide other types of utility. For example, possession utility, if you remember, is when you allow the target market to take ownership of the product. If our distribution channel is helping with that, say a retailer who actually buys the product from the producer and then turns around and sells it and takes the money from the consumer, they're providing the possession utility. We can also provide form utility. Form utility, again to review, is when we change the tangible aspect of a product to better satisfy the customer. When you go into a grocery store and you ask them to cut the meat in a certain width, you want 1-inch thick steaks, they are providing a form utility. However, if you just go buy a can of corn from the grocery store, there's no form utility involved. The retailer is just selling you the product. So form utility may happen, it may not. That could be a function though. The second function we have listed is customer service. And customer service is making the customer more satisfied, providing what they need. And this is a big, tricky issue in channels, because you may think they want the product quickly. So we're going to keep a lot of inventory for them. So whenever they want the product, it's there, it's available. Okay, so you're going to have a high storage cost, a very high storage cost. And as we'll talk about later on, there's some risk with that. Your transportation costs are probably going to be lower because you're doing that, but you run a lot of risk in holding that inventory. On the other hand, you may say, we want to cut cost. We want to not have inventory. We don't want to use storage. Okay, you cut that inventory cost. That's wonderful. That's great. But you know what? Your transportation costs are going to be huge, because you're going to have to make products special order and then ship them out as fast as you can. You're not going to be able to take advantage of some of the lower cost transportation methods. So there's a real cutoff here in terms of getting the customer what they want in a cost-efficient manner. The third function we have listed up there is addressing discrepancies. And addressing discrepancies, this is real tricky. What we're doing here is saying the quantity that the producer, in the first example, the quantity that the producer makes is not the quantity that the target market wants to buy. An example would be, let's say you're going on a date, you're driving to your date, you do that last minute check that everybody has to do, you know, any funny odors? Oh, wow, problem, had onions. So you zoom into the convenience store, you run in there and say, quick, I need some Wrigley's spearmint gum right now for fresh breath. And they say, hey, no problem. And they pick up their bat phone, they call Wrigley's Field, or not Wrigley Field, sorry, that would be baseball. They call Wrigley's in Chicago and say, okay, we need some gum right away. They say, no problem. Fire up their production run, fire off a pack of gum. They put it in their private jet. They zoom it over wherever you are, and they open this secret hatch and airdrop it down to you so you have that gum. How much would that cost? A whole lot more than what you're willing to pay, right? How can they make that affordable? They make it affordable by producing a large quantity of the product, and then each channel member is going to break that bulk down into the smaller quantity you want. So Wrigley's may produce 5,000 cases of a product, and one individual wholesaler may buy 100 cases of that 5,000. One retailer may order 1 or 2 cases, and then they get the cases, break it open, and put out the individual package. That's addressing the quantity issue. Assortment issue means one producer usually doesn't produce the variety that a consumer wants. And so what the middlemen are going to do, what the channel members are going to do, is get product from a variety of producers in order to give you that assortment, the choice that you desire. The last function deals with the cost of channels. You've probably heard people on TV make the statement, I've cut out the middleman so I can save you money. Sometimes this may be true, but many times it isn't, and let me show you why. We look at the cost of a channel by how many contacts we have to make. If you're a producer and you have to contact somebody, let them know what your product line is, what promotions you have available, your pricing, every time you make that contact, it costs money. So if we look at this industry, we see that there are an awful lot of contacts when there's no intermediary, no channel member. Each producer has to contact each customer. All these lines represent a contact. That's very expensive. On the other hand, if we add one middleman, we cut that way down. Say, for example, this middleman is Best Buy, and these different appliance producers, they contact Best Buy, let them know what the products are, make sure Best Buy has them on hand, and the customer can come on, see the wide assortment available, but the contacts have been cut drastically. Hence, they actually save price because they're more efficient. Okay. Let's take a look then at exactly what intermediaries are and the type that are out there. I've been using the term, but now we'll get a little more specific. In trying to define channel intermediaries, channel members, the main question we ask is, does that intermediary take title of the product? Do they ever own it? Okay, if the answer to that question is yes, then we say that they're merchant wholesalers. Merchant wholesalers usually buy the product and then turn around and resell it. There are different forms. Your book gives you a whole list of types of merchant wholesalers. Merchant wholesalers tend to do just about everything, but they can specialize. For example, a drop shipper never takes possession of a product. They buy the product, but they never physically have it. They arrange for the producer to take it to the customer that the dropshipper sells to. This may happen in a very large, bulky product. For example, if we have a dropshipper who deals in the oil industry, they buy it from the oil producer and then they sell it to somebody else, but they arrange for the producer to get the product to the other company. Rack jobbers commonly work in grocery stores or convenience stores, and they keep the racks filled. Snack food racks, books, usually paperbacks, magazines. They come in, they keep this product on their truck usually, and they manage the inventory. They rotate the product, they take out old ones, they put in the new. That's what rack jobbers do. If they do not take a title to the product, then they're usually either an agent and broker or a sales branch. Agent and brokers try to bring buyers and sellers together. Okay, they don't necessarily work just for one. They usually get a commission off of the sale. Sales branches are run and owned by the manufacturer, and they're just selling the product for the manufacturer. Okay, and finally, let's take a look at some of the different types of channels that are out there. We have direct channels, okay, and direct channels mean the producer sells directly to the end user. That's going to happen a lot with services. And we have indirect channels where there are channel members present. Consumer channels tend to be longer. They have, by longer I mean they have more channel members in the middle there. Multiple wholesalers, multiple retailers possibly. And the reason is they're breaking that large bulk we talked about before down into smaller quantities. Plus, consumers tend to be spread out all over the place. So we do see usually longer channels with consumers. In B2B, the channels tend to be shorter. B2B buys in a larger quantity. They buy less often. So we tend to see shorter channels, less intermediaries, possibly even more direct channels. A company may choose to use two different types of channels to reach the same target market, and that's entirely acceptable. Especially with online sales going on today, most companies are doing this. They will sell directly to a consumer via the internet, and they'll also sell through retail stores. That's dual distribution. And the last channel type are reverse channels. Reverse channels is when the product moves from the end user back up the channel, back up towards the producer. And this usually happens in three different cases. If the product is being returned, if there's a recall for the product, or if the product is being recycled. Obviously, if it's a return issue, we don't have to make major modifications in our channel. But with a recall, we might have to add some new channel members to help us handle this increased number of inventory for a while. And with recycle, we usually make changes in our channel permanently, so there's a way to deal with the recycling issue. Okay, so let's sum up what we're trying to talk about in this segment here today. Distribution is the only marketing mix element that can give an organization a long-term competitive advantage. Everything else we've talked about in this course will give you a short-term advantage because it can be easily copied by your competitors. A channel involves contracts with other organizations. It's very long-term, and it can give you a long-term, sustainable competitive advantage. Proper channel management includes choosing the proper structure and intermediaries to better serve our target market. In the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more on how we come up with that structure. I'll see you then.